Morning, everyone. Welcome to the panel on health. I would like to ask the panelists and moderator to please take your place on the stage, and we can get started. All right. Welcome back to the CMU India Conclave 2018. I hope everyone's caffeined up and as excited as I am for this panel on health. Dr. Devi Shetty today has given us a wonderful overview of the intersection of health and data and how it's all coming together. And this panel, we will delve into it deeper. So the panel on the future of health, how will technology disrupt healthcare? We have a wonderful roster of panelists for you today, starting with Dr. Anand Kumar, CEO and co-founder of Bugworks Research. Bugworks is leading the global charge against superbugs by designing next-generation antibiotics using computational techniques like machine learning and computational chemistry. Hello? Check. Okay. Bugworks is Anand's fourth successful startup. He has a rich experience in biotechnology, semiconductors, and the intersection thereof, and has an impressive patent portfolio to combine with it. Welcome, Anand. Very happy to have you here. Our next panelist is Rohit Kumar Pandey, CEO and co-founder of SigTuple. SigTuple has successfully harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to build a platform to analyze visual medical data very effectively. Rohit is a technology enthusiast, and he likes bringing technology to large systems. Prior to SigTuple, Rohit was director with the Amex Big Data platform. Welcome, Rohit.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is one of CMU's own, Kunal Kishore Dhawan, who did his master's in biotechnology and management from Carnegie Mellon University. He's the co-founder and CEO of Navia Life Care. Navia builds patient engagement platforms and solutions for medical providers across India, particularly targeting the tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India. Prior to Navia, Kunal worked at a pharmaceutical company, Fresenius Kabi, and held several international stints at this company. Welcome, Kunal. Our next panelist is Alok Medikapura Anil, who is the co-founder of Next Big Innovation Labs. Next Big Innovation Labs built India's first commercial 3D bioprinter. With the vision of synthesizing skin and organs in the lab to reduce the pressure in the organ transplantation industry. Alok is a member of the World Economic Forum's 3D printing expert network, as well as a global shapers community. Welcome, Alok. Dr. Shyam Vasudeva Rao is the founder and director of Renalix. He also holds several other positions at Forus with its Trinetra Vision Solutions, eHealth Enablers, Maastricht University, to name just a few. He's a very prolific inventor and author of several publications and journals. Renalix focuses on providing innovative solutions to the renal healthcare market. Welcome, Dr. Rao. And to lead us through this exciting panel today, we have Ruhi Kandari, who's moderating the panel. She comes to us from the Ken, where she's staff writer. She has a decade in journalism covering the impact of healthcare policies, digitization, and all the other wonderful topics that comes in this intersection. Welcome, Ruhi, and I'll pass it on to you to start us off on this wonderful panel. Thank you.
So I'm going to set the stage with some realities about healthcare in India. We have some of the worst indicators as far as healthcare is concerned. We have some of the highest maternal mortality, infant mortality, one of the lowest health insurance penetration, and our government spends about 1% in healthcare. That's again one of the lowest anywhere in the world. So with and access and affordability are two problems that come with this environment. So with that in mind, I want to start with what is the vision for technology in healthcare? What is it that it can do in this scenario? And what are the changes that we'll see in next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? What are the likely changes? And how convergence of engineering, biology, and healthcare is happening. So what is it that technology can do to make healthcare more accessible and more affordable? And we'll start with Anand.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and I want to thank Nisha and the colleagues for giving me an opportunity to sit with such an eclectic audience. So we are in a fantastically interesting times, guys. Problems, big challenges that need to be solved. And I think of it as an opportunity. So let's understand the backdrop. Technology is just a means to an end. So let's understand the backdrop, right? As she said, we spend just 1% of our GDP on healthcare, when the average in the world is 6%. We are the diabetic capital of the world. We are the cancer capital of the world. We lose 4 lakh people to infection every year. We have huge issues. And the foreign Western pharmaceutical companies and biomedical devices players will simply not innovate for us, which means we have no other way but to innovate ourselves out of this situation. What a fantastic opportunity. I wish I was 20 years younger. Right? It's phenomenal, right? Either you can say, oh my God, right? India's, is a difficult market and we have all these issues, or it's a great time to be here to solve these problems. And the key is, any solution we do in health, because we're talking about health, needs to be affordable, needs to be accessible, and it needs to be made for the Indian context. So very important. As Mr. Mohandas Pai, who's a friend of mine and an investor in our company, said, let Silicon Valley innovate for the top 1 billion people. Fantastic. High returns, high M&As, fantastic. There are still 6.78 billion people left after that 1 billion people. Let's not forget that. It's that 6.5 or 6.7 billion people that we are innovating for, whose challenges are completely different, whose microenvironment, whose macros, whose connotations are completely different. So this is what we're trying to do. This is the backdrop. So what has changed in the last 5 to 10 years to suddenly bring everything together? All of you know, cloud computing, mobility, cost of hardware, which is almost pennies to the dollar, has enabled lots of new things to happen, right? There's mobility, there's access, etc. Number one. Number two, in India, in the last 5 to 6 years, never happened before, engineers, doctors, scientists are coming together to create startup companies. Many of these companies here are examples of that. Very orthogonal skill sets are coming together to put companies together. So somebody looks at it from a science perspective, somebody looks at it from a 3D printing perspective, somebody looks at it as a big data problem and throws a neural network to solve a machine intelligence problem. So all these things are coming together. Number 5, incubation centers in India that are allowing scientists and engineers and big data guys to come together, like CCamp, like IKP, like BBC in Electronic City, etc., etc. So I see lots of changes happening which didn't happen when we did our companies 5, 10 years ago. Now, what are the trends? Never before has engineering, IT, and biology come together as it is coming together. There is no other choice but for this data convergence to happen to solve these big problems. And I'll tell you how. I want to give a specific example. I was a semiconductor physicist designing computer chips for 20 years and dropped it all and started studying medicine in my 40s. Because I realized the biggest problems that need to be solved are either in health, in food, or in the environment. And as I was discussing with someone yesterday, these three are actually connected together. So we looked at cancer, and we're simulating human cancer in CellWorks, one of the companies that I did at, where we're throwing differential equations and neural networks to model a human cancer. So an oncologist can look at the cancer of her patient visually on a computer and pick and choose the right medicine for that patient. Personalized medicine, directed therapy. Can you imagine this a few years ago? So you walk in, breast cancer patient, 70% chance she's not going to get well with that medicine because one medicine doesn't fit all. Voila, we've been able to capture her tumor, convert the biochemistry of the tumor through mathematical expressions into something that can be simulated. And with the click of the button, the doctor, so you can imagine, algorithms have gone in, engineering has gone in, big data has gone in. So I don't separate these things, they've come together. Next problem, superbugs that I'm working on now. Last 50 years, no antibiotics, we're losing 1 million people per year. In this country, we lose 250,000 babies, less than 21 days of age because of neonatal sepsis. Very hard problem to crack. Guess what? We looked at the bacteria, and we look at a piece of transistor and a piece of silicon, and we found that, wait, I can use mathematical expressions that are used on a CMOS transistor to model and map a bacteria. How exciting this is. Something from semiconductor physics gets completely moved over into microbiology. Sometimes I feel like 5 blind men looking at the elephant. But that's okay. The new non-linearities in India are happening because 5 blind men and 5 blind women are looking at a problem. in completely different ways. So I see this all coming together, and we have to solve our problems, we have to invent our ways out. The beauty is we are not cheap innovation, we are affordable innovation. Big difference. I was talking to someone in the National Health Service in the UK yesterday. Just so that you know, the United States spends 18% of its GDP on healthcare, and the UK is probably around that.
Yep.
Yet they don't have good solutions. So they're starting to look at India for many of the solutions here. Big data solutions, algorithmic solutions, saying, you chaps are working in the worst conditions in India. If you're able to crack a problem in that resource constrained environment, we want that.
Sure.
So these are the new things that are happening, so happy to be here.
Rohit, do you want to add about your work in robotics and what do you see, how do you see the future?
Sure. So Anand has captured it beautifully. So let me start with a question. So how many of you have ever felt that you can get a pizza in 30 minutes time, but it's so hard to get a CBC test report in 30 minutes time?
Absolutely.
So it's a very interesting problem, and we crave for it that pizza didn't get delivered in 30 minutes, but we never shout about it that blood test report or urine test report, which is so fundamental. It's a basic screening test, whether you are suffering from fever or you are sneezing, right? It doesn't get delivered. The report doesn't get delivered in 30 minutes, right? So these are some things which we saw when we started scratching the surface. We realized that at the grassroots level, the common screening test, right? Even they don't have effective solutions. And the solution which has existed, they have existed, last 10 decades, the same thing is being done, right? So the same consumable model which existed in the healthcare industry. So we thought that, let's do something interesting about it, because it's not just about generating the report, it's also about bringing in things like accessibility, accuracy, and affordability. Because if you see, we have only the global median for doctor to patient ratio is 1.2 to 1,000, right? Now we can't overnight increase the number of doctors. So how we can bring in an amalgamation of technology and human expertise to solve this problem. Similarly, the other problem is affordability, right? Means the inflation is going to be the highest in India. It will be around 12%, and it will be highest globally. So how we can reduce the cost of some of the basic tests which everybody needs. And last bit is accuracy. You won't believe the amount of time medical experts spend in analyzing data manually. It's phenomenal. And I'm an engineer. When I saw the stress which a doctor undergoes to scan different kind of slides under a microscope, I'm telling you, it's just painful. And that's the reason I have never seen a pathologist not wearing specs, because it's just painful. So we being engineers, we thought that how we can solve this problem. Of course, I am not a biotechnology expert. I am just a computer science engineer. But that's where the power of technology came in, the power of AI, the power of robotics. And we started looking at problems in a very different way. Why even go through the traditional route? Why not just digitize the data and try to use the power of AI to generate a report? The beauty of the efforts, what brought on the table was, we are not just generating number, because if you remember your blood report, you just remember seeing, you'll recollect seeing numbers, various kind of numbers, MCVs, MCH. But if I ask you, do you even understand what it is? Do you understand what is MCV? What is MCH? It's very hard. So what we did that we tried to add visual evidence with these numbers, because apart from affordability, accessibility, and accuracy, what healthcare need is transparency. Do you understand what a particular test means? What's the outcome of it? So this is how, this is how we are looking at the solution. And the interesting thing that from a trend perspective in the industry, if you see, all the big companies who were supposed to come up with interesting solution in the entire landscape, they are not the only ones who are working on it. You can see Google working on healthcare problem, and you are seeing a bunch of startups, right? Every other month, a bunch of startup comes in, who are trying to solve a different kind of healthcare problem. So the entire healthcare pyramid has been open by virtue of new and emerging technology. Absolutely. And a lot of experimentation is happening. And this is what excites me, that the amount of experimentation which is happening from top to bottom. Now people are trying to solve aging problems through AI. Just imagine how fascinating it is that if we can solve the problem of aging through AI. So that's a tidbit from my side. It's the most fascinating time for healthcare and the impact which technology can bring in healthcare. Yeah.
So Anand and Rohit have covered like 3-4 main areas that we look at in healthcare. One is preventive, which is diagnostics, and then is curative. So on one hand, he's working on antibiotics. On the other hand, he's working on making the tests better and faster. And another thing that's specific about India is that we have a double burden of non-communicable diseases on one hand and infectious diseases on the other. So there's work happening on both the fronts. Alok, do you want to come in and talk about again what the picture is, how we can change things by converging engineering, biology and healthcare. And secondly, what are the challenges in getting there?
Sure. Thanks, Rohit. Yeah, my fellow panelists, Rohit and Dr. Anand, have set the tone really well for this conversation. So with regards to why we started off and where we started off, so I'd just like to give you a brief glimpse. There are lakhs of people that wait on organ transplant wait lists every year, and a lot of people succumb to various diseases. FDA has kind of set up a process which takes drug companies about 10 to 12 years to bring a drug to market. It costs anywhere between $1.5 billion upwards. That's the reason we pay so much for the medicines we pay out there. So how could we, as a set of engineers, biologists, scientists, electronic experts, robotists come together and try and tackle the solution was what got us thinking and was what motivated us to start the company that I have right now called Next Big Innovation Labs. So what we do at Next Big Innovation Labs is we focus on the 3D bioprinting side, and with 3D bioprinting, it's about the engineering, the biology coming together. So the fourth industrial revolution is kind of looming upon us. We're at an age where the physical and biological systems are all coming together. There's a lot of talk about self-driving cars, IoT, smart devices connected to the internet. You see a fusion of technologies coming together. A lot of innovation which is going to happen in the next 10, 20 years is not new innovation. It's more on the lines of 2, 3 technologies coming together to create new products which are disruptive. So we are at the intersection of where engineering, which is our 3D bioprinting machine, and the biotechnology and the biology, which is us kind of synthesizing skin, trying to replicate the skin in the lab, trying to come up with not just the physical aspect of skin, but even the biological aspect, getting the composition of the skin right, coming together. What happens next? So it's about creating a product which can then go into R&D labs and disrupt an existing cycle. Today, when you look at the medical community, when you look at the R&D community, there is a lot of disruption which is yet to kind of happen. Other industries have seen that happen, but why is it that the medical industry, the health industry is not seeing that? Is it because technology has not kind of gotten easy access into kind of their workplace? Is it because they haven't kind of been open to working with engineers and technologists? These are questions that we ask ourselves even today. But one thing we know is the fact that disruption, affordability, accessibility, all of this is going to come when we kind of work closer with doctors. Just a very quick example is some work we do with some maxillofacial surgeons. So we have developed some algorithms which can convert a regular CT scan, which gives a doctor a front, side, top, bottom view. And we convert those CT scans into 3-dimensional models and then use a low-cost 3D printer to come up with the actual 3D model, which is specific to the patient. So this today is helping doctors act as this today is helping doctors use these models as pre-surgical guides. So what's really happening here? It's actually helping even an early stage doctor who's just moved out of his kind of education and into actual practice handle the most complex case. It's helping even the most experienced doctors now kind of use that model to kind of educate his kind of juniors and as to what could go wrong. When you're dealing with actual patients, you're dealing with actual lives. So this is an example of how technology is kind of coming into a doctor's lives and empowering them to treat patients better and also to kind of bring down the complexity of kind of medical surgeries. In the long run, as we kind of look at tackling bigger challenges when it comes to, say, availability of organs, so this is only possible when we kind of closely work with, say, the medical fraternity. They understand patients, they understand how to treat patients' lives. We understand technology, we need to kind of bring it together to kind of create solutions which could move around. Stem cell technologies coming in together with 3D bioprinting for us to create live tissues in the lab, and those tissues kind of eventually grow into certain organs and then kind of go into transplantable use cases. So the challenges I see is more on the lines of not technology not being there, it's more on the lines of different skill sets, different kind of people from different backgrounds coming together and working towards the common cause. Yeah.
Kunal, do you want to add? So what I see here is we have 3 different sections of people. One is a scientist or an engineer. And on the other hand, we have a doctor, a physician who's working with patients. And on the other hand, we have an investor, and there's someone who wants a business model. There's someone who wants to understand what the market looks like. Can you make it possible? So what are the challenges there? How do you get everyone together and work with these people, convincing them that there is something, like Alok said, the products are there, the technology is there, the convergence is happening, but the trials and tribulations that happen from getting it from lab to the patient.
Right. The key challenges that, and my perspective is sort of from a very, very small startup perspective. I have started a company with just myself, and then we are now 10 people. We are not a big company. And my work essentially is working with with hospitals. And when I say hospitals, Dr. Devi Shetty in the morning gave us a very, very interesting viewpoint. But I don't know how many of you guys noticed, all of his slides were focused on the US market. None of the slides were actually from the Indian market. What is a conclusion that you could draw out from that is, there is no data from the Indian market. There are no papers being published regarding the healthcare system, regarding a lot of the research that goes on within the ground realities of hospitals and doctors from the Indian market, which is fine, I mean, it needs to be improved, but I'm not the one who's going to do that, right? So my work essentially is a lot to do with understanding the ground realities of the adoption of such technologies within hospitals and doctors. And one of the key challenges that I have seen from my interactions or our company's interactions with our customers is interest alignment, right? What are each of the stakeholders' interests in getting the technologies to the market? What is an interest of a patient? When he or she falls ill, the only interested, I want to get better, right? That is my only interest. Most of the times we are willing to pay out of our skins to make sure that we are getting better. Insurance helps, but hardly any of the Indian market is insured. There's hardly 22% of the Indian market is covered or lesser, maybe. I'm not a big fan of statistics, sorry. But the point being that we are willing to do anything, right? But what is the interest of the hospital? Hospitals, even the bigger ones like Narayana Health, and the small mom and pop hospitals that sprout on every corner, the small nursing centers, they're all businesses. Their aim is to get people to come back repeatedly, right? If a patient gets fined too soon, they are not going to come back. India is not a preventive market. I'm guessing most of you will agree. We are a market that pays for emergencies and cures. That is it. Hardly, I think Healthify Me is one of the companies that has done a fantastic model, but even they don't work on prevention of certain diseases. They work on weight management, weight loss management. So apart from that, I haven't personally seen any success stories coming out of preventive healthcare subscriptions. So we are a very, very curative market. So from a hospital perspective, the sooner you get better, the worse it is for them, right? Unless, of course, you get more educated and empowered so that you are coming back again and again for preventive mechanisms. So that is one interest area. And what is the interest area of the doctors? Doctors' interest areas rise somewhere in between. There is an ethical perspective, the Hippocratic oath that they take in, where they have to take care of every patient, and they have a business interest in mind as well, right? So those are two very, very sometimes conflicting interests that they need to take care of. And that's where the technology then comes in, right? Doctors or hospitals who feel strongly towards maintaining relationships or making sure that the patient is continuously in touch with them start adopting newer technologies, such as the one that we work in. Like, we build patient engagement solutions, which basically build relationship management tools, like what Dr. Devi Shetty also said, chat enabled, voice to text, all that stuff from the hospital perspective. So as long as the interests of the two parties or the various stakeholders involved in the ecosystem is not aligned, there can never be serious adoption of newer technologies, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the government or the policy makers could play a pivotal role, because if healthcare should not be, firstly, healthcare should not be considered a business. I think that is the fundamental wrong of our industry, that it is all considered a business. It should be something that is a fundamental duty, right? A fundamental right of a person to get access to good quality healthcare. So if the policymakers pay a little more attention in terms of getting these technologies at a more affordable rate to the hospitals, who can then transfer them to the patient with similar aligned interest. That could be something that could be very, very helpful from a just as an industry perspective. So that's what I feel.
I'd like all of you to come in. So he talked about two very interesting things. One is the patient also is not interested in preventing a crisis. The doctor is not interested in curing the patient in a way that the crisis doesn't happen the next time. And then there's the government, the policies are also not aligned. And he's talking about a utopian world where healthcare should be considered a duty. But we know all of us have been in front of investors and who won't understand this language. So your anecdotes, your experiences and challenges in making this technology accessible, convincing the investor, going all the way and ensuring that you see the benefit of the technology reaching the person that it's supposed to reach.
Doctor, you want to take it, doctor?
Anyone, yeah.
Yeah, just to give to set the see, I've been in the area of healthcare for last 20 years, working with multinational company like Philips and all that. And what I fully agree with Kunal, what he says that prevention is all very nice things to talk about, but who is going to pay for it?
Sure.
It's a very big, very big challenge, and neither the doctors nor the patients are interested in or are going to fuel this thing, and it is the only way is the policy. Having said that, this is not new to India.
Yeah.
It's a global phenomenon, and everyone today have realized that the only affordable healthcare is preventive. And there is a big shift in the whole paradigm of healthcare, maybe in the US or Europe or India. We see that the shift is happening from instead of patient go to hospital, hospital go to the patient.
Yeah.
That means healthcare homes, home healthcare, these are the big things which are happening. And this is where we are seeing that the patients have to be more, or people have to be more empowered. They have to be more educated, and that is the only way they can take care of themselves. If at all somebody says that, okay, I ended up, like for example, you see, I work with renal care a lot, even, the best of the best is one, if you have in Delhi, you have the parliamentarians, all these guys. You see, we had two of our ministers, very important people, not knowing that they have kidney problem till the day that they were diagnosed for end-stage renal disease.
Sure.
And for a technologist like me, it's the simplest thing which we can do. I can detect kidney problem 10 years in advance. That means end-stage renal disease can be detected 10 years in advance. You can find out if they have a simple urine test, with just around 20 rupees. We can do this test. And that was what was surprising to me when I started to talk with my nephrologist friend, who is a very well-known person in this field and has been practicing this for the last 30 years, not only India, in Canada and all that. And that's when we said, okay, can we not do something about it? We just, in 2 days, we could hack something and make a mobile app with a small little dipstick and do this test. And now we are trying to push that. Now what happens is, who is going to pay for it? A person who has diabetes or hypertension is at a high risk of getting chronic kidney disease. And if they know that when they reach end stage, what will be their fate, they will then, be motivated to see that, okay, let me spend 50 rupees or 100 rupees and get this test done.
Sure.
So there is a whole lot of education which needs to be done. This is what we saw even in our experience with ophthalmology. Eye care is something, which everybody needs. In India, we have more than 200 million people who need some or the other form of eye care. And we have just touched around 10% of it. Okay, there is still 90%, 180 million customers waiting there. Now, how are you going to reach out to them? It's an affordability challenge. It is an accessibility challenge. And it is also, an availability challenge. You need to have doctors or technicians and equipment which is needed to do this test. If you see in eye hospital, there are so many different equipment. And even when you're going for a first checkup or even whenever you're going to the hospital, they're going to do all these tests. And now imagine if this has to move to the patient's home, or it has to move to the rural area, or to a semi-urban area. It's very difficult to move all of them. That's where we try to put that all into one. And that is what we made as Trinetra. And it was one of the best thing what an ophthalmologist could have.
Sure.
And so there, how do we get this financed? How do we get, okay, making this product and all that, that's no big deal, we can always pitch in. There are a lot of VCs who are interested, then they fund that and all that. But making it a sustainable business.
Yeah.
So that is where, we started to see how we can empower people, unemployed graduates in Odisha. All those, I like the guys, who have failed, they have not studied beyond 12th standard, and they have nothing else to do but just to while away the time. Get them, train them for 6 months in Bhubaneswar, and then, make them and, empower them. They are actually making a living out of one Trinetra.
Okay.
A similar sort of a thing we are trying with our dialysis machines. We have a dialysis machine at a company called Renlex, which can be put in a rural area. And it is a IoT enabled, cloud enabled, and all that. It has all the sorts of bells and whistles, whatever technology you want. But it is for the rural and for the semi-urban type of people.
Sure.
And with this equipment, people are trained. Here the training is much more, maybe 2 years training they need. So we have set up multiple arrangements for this training. And then the people are put back in their place, in the village, and then they start to run this equipment and start earning for every session they conduct. So this is the thing. And that is where, we said, okay, now we have the national dialysis program and also, a free dialysis policy.
Yeah.
So till today, there was nothing like free dialysis. It was only some very expensive insurance which would cover this. But now in the last budget and even this recent budget, there is a free dialysis policy, and all those who need dialysis, they get reimbursed. But now, what is needed is not the affordability part, the accessibility part.
Yeah.
So that is where, that comes in. And then there is this Ayushman program,
Yeah.
which we have been lobbying for a long time with the government. And now that's going to be rolled out. In two months, it's going to be rolled out.
Sure.
And that promotes preventive care and all sorts of fun. It covers more than 50 million families.
Yep.
And that's going to be a very big boon for the bottom 40% of the population. So once these sort of things come in, I'm sure, this will build that revenue models which will compensate for each other.
Excellent. Can I just add on to that?
Sure,
I
please.
think Dr. Shyam put it so well. Sorry. So challenges are happening at multiple levels. He spoke about the ecosystem and the costing, etc. But for you entrepreneurs, doing a company in this space takes steely nerves, right? You will age 5 years for every 1 year. It's called a healthcare startup age. Funding in India is extremely difficult for any of these areas. Leave technology. The easiest part is finding a guy who knows machine learning and artificial intelligence, 3-layer neural network, wavelet transforms, all this Python, oh God, leave all that aside. What problem are we solving and who the hell is going to pay for it? It's far more important. Technology is just an enabler, right? And so putting a company together, getting the orthogonal skill sets that are required, going out and raising funding, and then figuring out who's going to pay it for you are all huge challenges. But those who can get the escape velocity required to get out of it will do something wondrous. Then you're disruptive. Technology itself doesn't disrupt. The disruption happens when business models, your ability to get some investors to actually put money into you, etc., all come together. That's the disruption. Technology itself per se is not disruptive. So there are a lot of challenges in doing it here. So what approach do many of us take? We use India as a proof of concept market and then make sure your product is available for Western markets. So I know if we are successful and get an antibiotic, we want to make this antibiotic available for free because India has the biggest issue with drug-resistant infections. But I can't survive on public health spending. So you have to make your products global. So don't only think that it's an Indian product. It was done from the Indian connotation. It was done from the Indian consciousness. But it's got to be a product that scales and solves some global problem. If you look at some of the things he was talking about, renal health is a global problem. Eye is a global problem. India has a bigger problem because of accessibility, affordability, reach, etc. You solve that, automatically you connect to foreign markets. So POC in India and tap other markets, lest you be left out from a funding perspective and a scaling perspective, right? And the last point I want to add in the challenges part is, please understand the regulation is the hardest in the space. Funding, regulation, making money. These are the three axes, the Maxwell's equations, if you will. Maxwell's equations of the difficulty in the space is, if you don't figure out regulation, any of the work many of us are doing has to go through regulation. And regulation can take 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. India is still not up there in terms of regulation. So I have a very strong stomach, but the way you crack it, you crack regulation, funding, POC in India, market outside, you will be unique compared to anyone who's doing just an IT startup.
In fact, just to say, it took us around 1.5 years after we launched our product Trinetra in the market to sell the first 200 machines in India. But then it took just another 1 year to get it into 20 different countries.
Wonderful.
With 11 different type of certification, regulations and all that.
Regulation.
11 different countries, yeah. So that way it's regulation is one very, very important thing. And from the beginning itself, we have a global approach. That's very important. And in fact, our chief scientist was a UK-based person, from Warwick University, who was good in mathematical modeling and all that. So that way, even though we talk about a startup and small company in somewhere, in some Banshankari or some area, but still the outlook has to be, very global. And from beginning itself, we need to do this.
I'd like to give a different flavor to it because you have already covered a major aspect of it. So when you look at starting a healthcare company, you have to be very clear that what it will take for you to come up with the product. And it also reflects on the team which you are going to form. So for example, Anand talked about having a data scientist. I'm saying that's just one part of the puzzle. So when we formed the team, we realized that if we have to take a solution to the market, it will require regulatory approval, and we'll be a product company. This means intellectual property will be the core of the company.
Absolutely.
So you won't believe, in our team, the 8th employee was an intellectual property expert, and the 9th one was a regulatory expert.
Excellent.
And it's in 2016, it was when we just started. We started in later half of 2015. But you won't believe that has created a huge impact in the organization, because as our engineers were focused on building the technology, somebody was filing the IP. And if you don't have an IP, you can't get an investment. If you're saying we are a hardcore product company and you don't have an IP which is filed, not only in India, even outside India, because they value US jurisdiction the most from IP perspective, it's not going to work out. If you don't think about regulatory when you are designing the solution, because you need to have a quality management system in place, I'm telling you it will be too late if after 2 months you realize that, I have to have a QMS in place. Third thing is clinical trials. Unlike any other industry, an MVP doesn't work in healthcare industry. And you have to understand that, right? It's not a fashion industry where you're an MVP and some people will try it. This means you have to think about clinical trial the day you started designing the solution, that this is how the clinical trial has to be conducted. And once all these things are true, that's when the business model comes into picture. That if you have not thought about the business model, anyways, none of these things are going to fly. So as Anand said, yeah, it requires steel of, nerve of steel so that, you have that courage. But at the same point in time, we have to be pragmatic about it. Now coming back to investors, if you are going for something which is a very long haul, right? Because India ecosystem is still not that strong for a product company perspective, it will be tough to raise funds. But if you have thought that, okay, there are baby steps which I'm going to take, and every baby step is going to, see the light of the day, which an investor can understand, fundraise will be relatively easier. And healthcare ecosystem in India is at that stage where investors are looking at early success, which can further, in next maybe 7 to 10 years, can become a huge success. So that's 2 cents from me on this, yeah.
Okay, so we have government on one side, and that's, you guys talked about how it has helped and what are the successes that you have found in making renal care, dialysis, for instance. You're talking about hiring someone who's a regulatory expert, and I work in Delhi and I know how hard it is to even report on government and understand how it works. Are there any challenges that Alok or Kunal, you want to come in and say? There are things that have worked for them, but there are things that do not work right now. So it's a catch-22 situation any which way. You have an investor on one side who's saying, show me early access. But like things that you look, that it seems that it take a long time. So you're taking baby steps towards something that is not happening right now, but will happen later. So I don't want to say failure, but things that lessons that we can learn from your experiences.
Right. Sure. With regards to the investor angle, I think my colleagues have covered that quite extensively. So just to add some optimism to kind of what the government is doing, so we've been kind of regularly engaging with the health ministry through the World Economic Forum, trying to kind of get them to kind of see what has happened with other countries when it comes to making healthcare accessible, affordable, and sometimes even free. So really India wants to kind of look at taking that approach, and that's why they kind of come up with certain schemes where they're saying healthcare at like a very negligible cost to kind of ensure like all Indians are insured, but is that enough? So really that comes to the question, how did it all start? And eventually it boils down to what India is looking at as a country. One, we are one of the youngest kind of populations in the entire world. Our average age is about 27. And India, there's a constant debate about how fast we're growing as an economy. 8-9%, some people debate, lesser some people say. So the interesting approach that we've taken at a lot of conferences and meetings is about linking the growth of the economy to a healthy population. So we're saying if the population is unhealthy, there's enough metrics to prove that your GDP is going to slow down over a period of time. Aging population slows down GDP. That's quite evident in most nations you see right now. Even Japan's going to start seeing that problem. China is starting to also see that problem later on. So we've started kind of linking that to say, one, you have to kind of focus on kind of keeping your population healthy. Second, prevention, again, prevention is better than cure, they say. So we tweaked that a bit and said prevention is also cheaper than cure. What really that means is as you try to kind of bring in, even an insurance company, for example, really doesn't want to pay for expensive healthcare costs that you incur when you go in for a renal transplant. What they would rather pay is for you to get screened at a much more cheaper cost and then keep you from getting ill. So that really kind of is been the approach we've taken. And gradually you see even the new budget that was announced by the Karnataka Health Ministry as certain kind of a small kind of space provided for screening of cervical and breast cancer. That gives us the kind of motivation, because all of us, as we build out companies, end of the day we wanted to benefit people, and then without government, how do we have access to these people? So eventually I feel the government is trying to kind of understand it, but on the lines of them trying to say, okay, it's more based on the economy, or kind of just rolling out policies for the people. One main challenge that we have seen, and which companies in our space have seen, is since we're more into the R&D side, and potentially we have to very closely work with doctors and the medical fraternity, is the ease of accessibility when it comes to taking my technology and putting it in the hands of doctor. One, the challenge that we see is, one, as a doctor, they've kind of come up through their kind of own system of learning, practice and stuff, and sadly they've not been exposed to too much technology beyond what is necessary to do their surgeries, to do their kind of treatment to patients. So when we try to bring in new technology and say this is going to empower you to do a surgery better, or it will bring down the time to do the surgery, or it will bring down the cost to do a surgery, it's kind of taking in a new skill, a new kind of learning opportunity to a doctor who's already kind of filled with things to do in his day-to-day life. So that is the key challenge we feel. So it's about finding the right person who kind of can be the person who's ready to adopt to the change, and then eventually it trickles down from there. One other challenge that I see is the fact that when it comes to funding, so initially the government has great support mechanism when it comes to idea stage companies. You have at the central stage the Biotechnology Ignition Grant, which is ready to fund up to 50 lakhs for companies who are at the idea stage and want to take and want to move into proof of concept. The government of Karnataka has also started similar program. And but what is lacking is the fact that I believe the later rounds of funding are not easy to come in India, primarily because then there is a gap. Why there is a gap is one of the reasons I see is the fact that proof of concept companies hit a roadblock. Why that is because there is no easy movement of their technology going into, say, hospital chains. Today it's very difficult to even go and interact with a doctor at AIIMS, and even more difficult to even roll out your product for clinical trials as such. But when you look at the NHS in the UK, They have a division called Nokri, NOCRI, that's kind of facilitating startups to closely work with NHS. So NHS will take your product and they will do your trials. They will try to kind of facilitate the kind of investors to come in and fund those trials. So we require more of these kind of initiatives coming in, so the proof of concept companies can take their product further and kind of validate, and then once the validation is done, it seems more kind of pleasing to the Series A, Series B investors to come in and put money into this and then scaling it out. So,
yeah. Great. So Kunal, I want to talk about this one. Health is a state subject. So one thing that Alok talks about, and it's interesting that some states are more proactive than others. I recently reported from Haryana, which has invested a lot in EHR. They're collecting EHR from large percentage of population already. And Kunal works with data, and he works with doctors and with hospitals. So how do you see this, what are again the challenges and the opportunities, things that don't work and work when you go and try and convince the doctor and the government to, one, push a proof of concept to clinical trial stage, and two, using data, convincing the doctor to use that data, and also convincing the state government to think that this is something that will benefit them, aligning the interests in a way that the patient is benefited?
Okay. So that's an interesting question. Unfortunately, I do not interact with government at all.
Okay.
And I'm like the happiest person on this panel right now. I have no problems in life with respect to government. But what is interesting is that I mostly work with private players, right? But the mentality is still the same when it comes to adoption of newer technology, and especially EHR, right? So let me take it back a step further, right? Let me put it a step back and try to give you a life cycle of how we sort of have built what we've done. So when we started the company, our first product was a pill reminder system. It basically told you when you have to take your medications, right? That's all it did, right? Over the next 6 months, the only thing that we did was we just randomly spoke with people. We told them to download our app and just try to do this. One of the key problems that they faced was, who's going to input my data? Who's going to put my alarm system? Like, maintaining a calendar on Google is very easy, right? Most of the invites when you get, you just have to click on add to my calendar and it synchronizes continuously. But when you have to set up an alarm and a pill reminder for every single day, there are certain things that you need to put. You need to put the name of the medication, you need to put the number of tablets you're going to take, or whatever doses you're going to take. You're going to put what time you wake up, what time you sleep, so that the pill reminder is smart enough to understand, theek hai, if you have to take it twice a day, 99% of the times you have to take it either when you wake up first time and then before you sleep, right? So that's a smart system that has been developed. But still, inputting data is the most toughest challenge that you are going to face as a EHR player, right? And this is something that Dr. Devi Shetty also touched upon in the morning, that doctors don't want to type. They don't want to type at all. Like, if they had a chance, they would just, have some sort of a system in their minds where whatever they think, it would just automatically get typed. And voice is excellent in that sense. So, and this is like a trade secret, okay? Don't tell anyone. So next month, we are launching a prototype of Navi, which is our voice assistant for doctors. Basically, what it's going to do is very, very simple. It's going to help doctors write prescriptions by just speaking to their phones. So they're going to dictate their prescriptions on their phones. The system is going to recognize what is a drug name, what is the dosage, going to set up alarms automatically so that the patient is able to get their alarms on when to get their medications, right? And similarly, all the case notes, presenting complaints, examination and diagnosis, everything gets streamlined on the basis of voice. So that's, hopefully it'll work, but till then, fingers crossed. But the point being, voice is something we have seen, at least in our market, in our customers, that is something they're ready to adopt. And since our customers, again, are doctors, are hospitals, who don't have the wherewithal or the resources to start putting in money into data entry people who are just, scanning prescriptions or adding data of the prescription into the EHR software, the tools have to be made in a way that they strongly, reduce the time taken in order to do this data entry. And I think voice is something that is definitely going to help. Having tablets and you know, mobile friendly platforms that could, you know, where you can just scan your prescription using a photo, using a camera or something, could also again add a lot of value. So why I said that our first system was a pill reminders and it took so much time is because that impacts the kind of adoption that you get for your system, right? The adoption that you get from a customer standpoint. It took us 6 months to onboard our first client, first customer, but now we're doing 4 or 5 customers per month. And it's just been around what, 8 months since our first client onboarded. So it's been the more you try to closely work with the customer and all, things start working out because you try to understand what they need.
Can I just add one quick
Sure,
point?
sure.
Because we're talking about disruption, technology all coming together, right? There are many states in our country that have no radiologists, no cardiologists, no pediatricians. You go to Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Northeast states, they have like 1 radiologist for 2 states,
Sure.
right? So our friends of ours in Whitefield, beautiful company called Teleradiology, husband-wife team that came back after their MD, PhD from Yale, put together a group of radiologists sitting in Whitefield. Just imagine this. And now they're getting scans from low-cost scanners that go into Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Naxal-infested areas, and these images are coming through the 3G mobile or geo networks that are there in all these places. See how telecommunication, mobility, all coming together, right, to solve real problems. How exciting. Now they're sitting in Whitefield and they're reading reports for a woman who needs to deliver a baby somewhere deep in Jharkhand. From a top-class pediatrician here or a top-class cardiologist that needs to see the thing. Then they realized, wait a minute, too many images are coming. ECGs, CT scans, all the stuff. We just don't have the bandwidth to read all of these images coming. Guess what? Got together 4 or 5 guys who joined them to do image processing algorithms. Who can start looking at these images that are coming and use digital signal processing and image processing and start extracting some features from that. Guess what next? They hired 4 people to do AI and ML to take all of this data to do some automated reading of scans so that the radiologist's work, her work is reduced by a factor of 2. So clear example of a major unmet need in our own country in completely inaccessible areas being solved by convergence of technologies, right? And that's very fascinating. Then they realized that there's no money to be made. Back to the point you were talking about. Chhattisgarh ain't gonna pay. Assam ain't gonna pay. They opened up this service to international markets. And now they're a $100 million business because images from New York University or Mass General or San Francisco State University come to Whitefield for reading. So a classical example of using convergence technologies to solve real problems here, but figuring out market globally. I rest my case.
Anyone, any final thoughts on this? So what I've understood, there's something that we talk about in behavioral economics and even in writing. When you have a huge problem, you break it down, you put it very beautifully. Start very, very simple, like pill reminder, and take baby steps towards where you want to get to. You're getting to voice assistant for doctors. And you're talking about telecommunication, again combining and making it into a story that can be sold and also combining interests of various parties around it. Anyone, any final thoughts? And then we can take questions.
I can tell you one thing about autonomous devices, like we have autonomous cars and all these stuff. When we did Trinetra, we said, okay, our person A was a driver. And in another version of Trinetra, it was a Anganwadi worker, like that. But then the problem is that, okay, when you try to solve the problem with this type of people, in the rural area it's okay, they don't mind, who is going to screen, who is going to take the image and all that. But now, we want to bring it to the urban area or into the international market where they are very, very, very focused. They are worried about their data privacy and all these sort of thing. They don't want some driver or some low level educated person to take these images or whatever. So that is when, we found that the acceptance in the market was not so easy.
Yeah.
That was one problem. The second problem is the operator variability is a big threat for all of machine learning. And when you are dependent on a person, and on his mood and all that, every time, they don't focus so much, and then sometimes they are getting good images, sometimes they are getting pathetic ones, and then ultimately, the people blame this device is not good enough.
Yeah.
That was the problem. So that is where, we said, okay, how do I solve this problem? And that's where, we saw, okay, the autonomous systems are getting popular. Now we have made a device which is totally autonomous. A person just goes, puts his chin there, and then the machine does all the tests. And with that, we are now in a position to get consistent reports and consistent images, and we are in a position to now do the machine learning much better. And this is something, which we learned with this focus, and even though you have all the things, you focus on the right type of things and all that, but then once you get into the field, that's when you really get to know what are the real problems.
Sure.
So
I'd like
this
just
is a
add,
very
yeah,
interesting
I'd like to just want to summarize. So this is the most fascinating time for Indian ecosystem because we have a huge amount of data. We have a very young task force with different kind of talent. Government is ready to do their bit, and all the big companies in the world, they are focused in India because China has become a different ecosystem. So hence, my 2 cents on this will be that in the next 10 years, if you see, the healthcare battleground will be India. It won't be the US, it won't be China, just because India as an ecosystem, we are very open and we have tremendous resources in form of data and task force. And what we are seeing is that the confluence of technology is giving us the edge for experimentation. The only thing which is lacking and which is going to come is support from government and investors, which has started trickling in.
Yes.
But the next 10 years, I'm pretty positive that the battle of healthcare innovation will be in India. It won't be in China. It won't be in the US. Yeah.
Very well summed up.
Very good.
Very well summed up.
Brilliant. With that thought, questions, please.
I must first. My name is Haran. I've been working in healthcare in a different perspective from all of you for the last 40 years since I had my PhD from high school in 1976. I compliment all of you for outstanding perspective you gave. But I do want to challenge 2 things. Positive part of it, I can absolutely agree with you that India is going to be the forefront in terms of technology. The medical tourism is example why many people want to go to India for high-tech medical care compared to so I'm changing the word, not healthcare, medical care. So I do compliment all of you. Technology is going to help treat, get better information, high-quality information, and so on. Having said that, as Devi Shetty said, you also said, I worked for the last 40 years in 5 countries, Indonesia, Bangladesh here. 65% of the people don't have access to health care in terms of antenatal care, prenatal care, safe delivery, immunization, diarrhea management, and all those things. There I want to come back to saying, how is the technology is going to help? I see in terms of medical care, urban focus is going to help, but it's going to increase the cost. And addressing this particular topic, yes, it will improve the quality of health, medical care, but it's going to also make it significantly more expensive for the majority of people, even in urban area. Now, the last point I want to make is, in the rural area, 65% of the people who don't care, we need to think very creatively how this technology is going to help.
Yeah.
Technology cannot be ignored. How can it help? It should not ignore them.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 examples which may be helpful. Like, for example, information, you said. If you have, many of the people in primary health care and sub-health centers and so on, you don't have a database for them. We don't know who got what information because they don't keep the cards. So we can have information. There is a computerized information system of following patient records, family records, and so on, reminding them when to come for their antenatal care, reminding them for when to come. And so what I'm trying to say is we need to be very clear. There's nothing wrong. This is excellent for medical care. High quality, and it's going to increase the cost, but it's very good. But still, I'm very concerned it should not deal to neglecting what I've been talking very nicely about preventive, promotive health care for our rural majority of people who are still have no access.
Sure.
Excellent point.
Yeah, I'll just like to give you one simple example. So UNICEF is working on a very interesting project, and It's primarily, oh, you work with them, right? So they have come up with, they are working on a research project where they're putting a blue curtain and they capture the image of your face to figure out what are the deficiencies which you might have. The only thing which is involved is capturing an image behind a blue curtain. And the rest of the thing is being done by technology to indicate what are the various kind of deficiency. Now, why this kind of solution is being built? So that it's scalable. It can go to the masses. It can go to populations, whether it's in India, which are rural, or in Bangladesh or Indonesia. So the technology is not only meant to bring in high-end solutions which are extremely expensive, and that will be required, right? But also grassroots level thing which should be accessible to everyone to figure out, okay, what are the basic deficiency which I'm suffering from, or things like basic tests, right? Basic urine test, blood test, or any kind of test. So it has to be an amalgamation of both, but definitely the technology is enabling that, because 10 years back, it was not possible for someone to capture an image and figure out what the deficiency is. Because the power which AI is bringing in, right, the computer vision is bringing in, that is enabling it. So that's just one example, but of course, some of these things will have their own gestation period, but it's definitely going to see the light of the day.
So if I may just say something, very, very quickly, whatever technology and we enable, the fact is very humbling. This is very humbling. We're spending only 1% of our GDP on health.
Yeah.
Guys, we can't, and we are a very complex, large country, 1.32 billion people. So our spending needs to be at 2%, 3%, 4%, because the 65% of the population you spoke about is touched by public healthcare centers, right? If that was working well, and then on top of that you juxtapose it with all these beautiful technologies coming from areas like Bangalore that can help it, then we have a chance. So my humble comment is, whatever we talk about, you know, we all should be talking to our Ministry of Health or the Prime Minister, saying, you know, cut 1% from defense and put it towards health. I mean, we can't cut it. Technology will not be able to cover that entire gap.
Sure.
So that's very humbling thought.
Yeah.
I think, just sorry, I think that the technologies already exist to reach millions and millions of people in the country. It's something that we have in our pocket all the time. It's a phone. Like a 1.1 billion unique phone users today in the country. I think that's a huge number of people who you can just access by just pressing the call button of your phone. So if we can just leverage the power of mobile, I think we can reach healthcare where nobody has ever reached before. I mean, you don't need to have fancy objects, you don't need to have fancy equipment, it's just your phone. A phone can do wondrous things.
Sure.
If I may just add, so just like judges, we have a shortage of doctors in the country.
Yep.
And ideally one big issue that we see is the way the health system is structured. You have your primary healthcare centers that have access to the rural masses. Not everyone can make it to an AIMS. The nearest AIMS is either too far away or maybe too expensive for them to do it, to even maybe take a day off from work. So ideally empowering these primary healthcare centers with enough technology to connect them with the right doctors. Say, for whatever reason, doctors are not ending up in the rural areas, even though they have to, primarily because there's no good pay or no standard of living. So empowering the PHCs with enough kind of technology to connect to the right doctors and kind of use it not just as a kind of a gateway to kind of screen a disease, but more importantly, how could you kind of get access of the best of the doctors sitting in AIMS Delhi to the nearest village in say Haryana, for example. So I think that is a challenge that the government is also trying to tackle. It's more of a restructuring which is needed to ensure we have access to people, we have touch points. It's just that are we getting in the right technological tools? Couldn't be the most complex still. Are we just connecting the right kind of environments together to capture the data to kind of ensure there's easy flow of kind of knowledge and kind of
Sure. Yeah. You want to say, Dr. Shah?
Yeah, I have a very concrete example for this. We have like diabetes and all these, you know, we are also the capital of certain other diseases. Like for example, blindness at birth, we say. That is, babies born blind. That is the statement. But then, if you see, they are not born blind. They have become blind because of certain reasons. And one of the problem called as retinopathy of prematurity, ROP. And ROP is such a problem that all these premature babies are at a very high risk of getting blind. We have in India around 27 million births happening every year, out of which 4 million are prematurely born. 4 million. 10% of them are at a risk of getting this ROP, and if they are not detected and treated within the first 6 weeks after birth, then the baby is blind for rest of the life. So that is a problem. And then how do we do this? Okay, these babies are born in all over the place, of course, thanks to the ASHA system and all what is introduced. And now at least the births are happening, particularly premature births happening in institutions. Like we have set up a lot of SNICUs in all the states. There are SNICUs. Karnataka has around 27 of them. And now the problem is, how do we detect this? And you know, there are 200 specialists across this country, 200 pediatric ophthalmologists who can read these images and say that the baby has ROP or not. And to treat them, there are 30 doctors, just 30. So we are talking about 4 million screening per year, first screening, within the first 6 weeks. It's a real-time problem, I would say.
Absolutely.
And you need a system where it can, you know, with this 200 people can get these images and read. That's the only way we can do it.
Sure.
So what we did is, we made a device, or we first found, okay, is there any device for that? And there's only one company in the world, you know, which was making this device, called as a company called RedCam. And they were making this device, which cost around 1.2 crore. And the whole of India, you know, we have around 16, 20 of these devices. So we made a device right from the first principles. I have 5 patents in that area, and within 3 years I could come up with a device, and we introduced this device at 1/16th of the cost. And today we have taken up a challenge along with Narayana Netralaya. In Karnataka, we want to eradicate blindness due to ROP.
Wow.
And we have put this already in 14 centers, this device and this mechanism. We have something called as a Wise ROP system, where the baby is screened, immediately the images get uploaded, and then the doctor on the other side gets a message, and through his mobile app or laptop, whatever, they can read this, immediately tell, okay, what stage the ROP is. And if it is in the advanced stage, they'll already schedule a treatment, you know, in the nearby hospital or the specialist who is going to do that, and it is tracked till the closure. And the baby is tracked for 6 years after that. The entire thing is on mother's Aadhaar identification, and we tag the ASHA worker and the mother, both geotagged with Aadhaar and so on.
Wow.
So that way, you know, the whole system, Wise ROP system is now in place. And we are, by the end of the year, we should cover all 27 SNISUs, and see that at least in Karnataka, we create a role model for the country and maybe to the world, that there is no baby getting blind because of ROP.
So I think you answer your question. It's a very Gandhi's talisman question.
I think, to be fair to them, we don't expect all the solutions to be able to done today.
Yeah.
But the idea is, I will give another example just to support your point. For example, the technology was a remarkable technology called vaccine vial monitors. DVM is a heat-sensitive small label that made a remarkable difference in terms of ensuring the quality polio or other vaccine delivered, because if it is expired, heat exposed, it will show. For example, that's an example of a technology being used. What I am expressing the concern is, when we are going overboard with the technology for better medical care, rapid diagnosis and all those things, I am concerned this is still not going to address some of the basic fundamental care. A woman getting pregnant, she needs an antenatal care, contact, a basic medical care. I will also add one more thing to this, that medical care, just an X-ray will not do for her, or a blood test will not do her, because she needs to still be with a nurse or a doctor who can communicate, which the technology cannot do, or maybe artificial intelligence can do, communicate with her that it is very important for you to eat well, very important for you to come for 2 times, and then, you know, even with the vaccination, nobody talks. They just give vaccine going, because the pill, all those things. What I'm saying is, technology alone cannot solve the problem.
Of course,
It is supplemented by one, he said, additional budget.
Sure.
Number 2 is that communication.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, technology is good, but let's not make it a thing, it is a panacea. It has to have still substituted with the basic concerns of human contact, access to healthcare, additional budget from the government. All of this.
Sure.
Hi.
Just one sec. So we have about 10 minutes. Can we have 2-3 questions? And if you can say who you want to direct it to, and then it's the panel before lunch, and I'm sure all of us want to head out.
Okay, so my question is a bit of a free hit. It's anyone can take this. Dr. Devi Shetty told that the diagnosis of patients, since they are based on finite parameters, it could be handled by technology, like in say 5 years. But Dr. Shyam just mentioned this ROP solution took about 3 years, and that was an impressive thing to have done.
Sure.
So realistically, if you had to have one dream or one prediction to make that how technology can disrupt healthcare, what would it be, and what are the challenges possibly to prevent that from happening?
Oh, that's a huge, yeah.
Any other questions?
Hi. So, question. Since we are talking about the future of healthcare, the first one is quite generic. I'm very curious to know what is the scope or implications of augmented reality and virtual reality in healthcare, not just restricted to surgery. And secondly, which is very specific, I have some of my friends who are doing their postgraduate in surgery and medicine, and some of them actually share a lot of interest in terms of understanding what are the new age technologies. But when they search for resources, methods or online courses to learn the applications of these new technologies in healthcare, there's nothing. And I have tried to reach out to some of my friends in the US as well, but I've not found anything which is very useful. So if you can help me with anything like that, that will be helpful.
Can I? Oh, you want to
There's
take
one,
all questions?
there's
or-
one more question. I think that should be the last question.
So I just recently graduated after my undergraduate, and during my last semester project, my final year project was on Alzheimer's disease, like classifying whether, based on EEG, classifying whether a patient has Alzheimer's or not. It was an ambitious project, but it was a small project with like just 15 subjects. And one of the biggest problems was we took our data sets were from different sources. So one of the biggest problem was getting all the data set into one format. And when you're involved with products which will deal with a lot of data and various data coming from different formats, how do you get all of them into one format? How do you tackle that?
Okay, great. The lady at the back?
I have two questions. I mean, we've all very passionately spoken about healthcare here, right? But talent migration for healthcare startups is still a challenge, right? What are we doing for that? Second is, now this comes as a consumer, right? We all spoke that India as a market is not very preventive market, as in we only look at a problem once we have it. The only reason to it was education, because you don't see a lot of content about the normal diseases, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I will see a content about the service of 30 minutes delivery, right? Which is why the likes of Swiggy, who are giving us experience in delivery, are getting attraction, right? But as a consumer, when I read about the new technologies that have come onto the market, I'm really wowed, but I don't know why. And if the why behind it is not sent out as a real message, the attraction to work for it gets a little lesser. So I wanted to understand if we are doing something for it or not, because that's a great panel of doctors and startups here. I thought could be I can expect a great answer. So.
Can I take a quick crack? Oh,
Sure, yeah.
Right? So
That's the last question.
That's right. Just very, very quickly, I'm sure others want to opine. For the young man who asked a question, that's your business plan for a company. I think you should start it. That is a lacune of bringing all technology, science, medicine all together and offering a course. Coursera and others don't have it. I mean it, not frivolously, but it's something to think about. You asked a question, great question. I don't have an answer. Just a suggestion that you may want to dig deeper to see if there is a business opportunity. The question here in terms of the major trends is, I'm going to take a point that Kunal made. We have 1.1 billion people who are today connected through the cell phone. All the magic all the magic to reach those 1.1 million is going to happen at two layers. One is without funding, we're screwed. But beyond that, the database, Aadhaar, mobility, India Stack, all coming together to make healthcare, at least you can reach such a population which you could not reach otherwise by just throwing budgets and just hiring more doctors and just building more district hospitals, right? So major things. And all of these new mobile phones that are being manufactured in India, not the iPhone, but I'm talking about the more affordable phones, will have various sensors in them. So they should be able to sense your key parameters, like obviously pulse is already there, but blood pressure, or should be able to keep it here and look at my heartbeat. Lot more of the basic devices are all going to get integrated through convergence technologies into that handheld phone. And I can actually see the heartbeat of 1.1 billion Indians. I mean that metaphorically and scientifically, right? So you can actually see a heartbeat of 1 billion people, and through that capture so much of data.
Yeah.
To your question on different data sets, trivial problem. We have the best engineers here. There is enough NLP and other sources that will figure out how to create bridges across that. We have never come, I have at least not come across an issue, and we work with extremely complex data sets in cancer and infection. And for the young lady, the question that you asked on talent, the talent that's missing in the healthcare ecosystem is regulation, taking product to market, figuring out how to make money. That's the key talent, and very, very tough to get people in India who understand what Philips in Netherlands is thinking about in licensing a product. But you can get an AI guy, you can get an ML girl, you can get any of the good talent set here, and you can work with incubation here. But how to put a company together, understanding intellectual property, like Rohit said, IP, regulation, funding, go to market. These talent sets are just starting to happen. Thanks.
I would like to add a few things. I'll just touch on a few points which has already been highlighted. So on the data part, as you rightly said, we have tremendous amount of data. The thing is, you won't believe, and this is the brutal fact, right? The hospital and labs, they run on something which is called as Hospital Information Management System and Lab Information Management System. You won't believe we say that, we are the second largest or third largest Silicon Valley in the world, but still, just go and look at the software which are being used in these labs and hospitals. You'll not realize that we use fascinating apps like Facebook and WhatsApp, and what's the state of software being used in healthcare industry. I'm telling you, if only 10 startups come into that space, half of the data problem will be sorted out.
Great.
However, government has started making reforms there as well. So if you see the latest documentation which came out from Niti Aayog, they have talked about creating a data marketplace where they are going to put all the data which government has on a platform so that people can access it. So there are two parts to it. One I'm saying is that there is an opportunity for startups to come in and create smart HIMS and LIMS so that you can structure the data. And the second thing I'm saying is government is doing their bit to open up a data repository which everybody can access. Coming back to the point of the AR and VR space, so I'll just give you a very simple idea. The entire analysis in healthcare space requires a lot of visual analysis of medical data, right? So it's in different modalities. It's in radiology, it's in pathology, it's in cardiology. So as far as AR, VR technology is concerned, I'm not married to a particular technology, but considering the problem which is there in manual analysis or visual analysis, some of these technologies can be used to augment the review process, right? Because some of these review processes are very tedious. So again, I'm not giving you a particular use case, but the bigger picture which I'm highlighting is the bigger pain is the manual review of visual data. And if AR and VR can come to help or augment the analysis process, it will be a big deal. To the question for which came from the lady, so awareness is the biggest problem. So that's the reason I asked this question, that when you look at your blood report, do you even understand what an MCV and MCHC or RDWSD is? The day you start thinking about it, you will start appreciating what technology is and what it can do. So for example, hemoglobin, I'm saying all of us care about hemoglobin. I have low hemoglobin and bigger, higher hemoglobin. But do you understand that what the hemoglobin looks like in your blood cell? Have you even seen it, right? So I'm saying if you become curious, and that's where the awareness and transparency part comes into picture before the three A's comes, that if you are aware and there is transparency, you will be able to map what technology can do and what technology can't do, the latest technologies. And on the talent part, this is the biggest myth in the Indian ecosystem. People are saying so many engineers can't be employed. I'm telling you, it's all wrong and it's all unnecessary statistic. Yeah. There are a lot of talent in this ecosystem. The only point is we are ready to migrate talent. We are not ready to nurture talent. Nobody is saying that, you know what, there are fresh young people coming out of college, we'll create an ecosystem to nurture them. People are happy to migrate talent, or people are happy to, you know, hire talent from other company. Nobody is interested. And that's what we have to learn from Chinese. If you see what China is doing, China is saying we will nurture talent here, right? We will nurture talent and then we'll have a task force. So the intent should be to nurture talent, to have a huge talented task force, rather than worrying about whether, you know, we have enough or we have to migrate people from other country. Yeah.
And on that positive note, we will close. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but what a captivating discussion that was. I want to thank Ruhi, Anand, Alok, Shyam, Rohit, and Kunal for giving us that wonderful discussion. Lots for us to think about. And I want to thank you for being an amazing audience. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for the pin drop silence. It's been a wonderful panel. Thank you. And we'll open now for lunch. So please enjoy. Thank you.